I might be either the smartest or most retarded person in the world because of this invention. This is a standard pair of headphones. They're like $200. Pretty good. They get the job done. But this is another pair of headphones, a headset to be in fact, that is not working because the part that actually attaches to your head broke off at some point, and so it still has the headphone and the microphone, but no way to actually get it on your head. So I had the bright idea of just taping the small headphone piece onto the outer part of these headphones so that I could then use the microphone relatively close to my face in the context of this thing, and I would be able to use Discord or make callouts in this game with relative ease without having to buy an entire microphone. Now, the reason I'm using this fucking thing is because it's available. This is a 2002 headset from the game SOCOM 2 on PlayStation 2. It has a USB, so it's perfectly functional on anything that uses USB. And I refuse to buy an actual headset. So when I'm making callouts in this game, I always sound like I'm speaking from a bygone era, and people like to make fun of me for it, but it's all in good fun because that is the spirit of competitive gaming. The point is, I can fucking tell you where you need to be. What more do you need? I kinda like using this thing, to be honest. It makes me feel quirky. There was a time when I was really interested in philosophy and neuroscience and the history of video games before I ended up learning about most of the interesting or relevant history and image boards and all of the different intricacies of the lore, various lore characters of the boards, lolcows, so to say, anime, film, politics, very deep aspects of politics, literature, sociology, technology. It felt like I was interested in so many different things, and I had so many thoughts about my interests, so many things to say. I was particularly obsessed with making YouTube videos and also the meta around YouTube, the people on here and the way that they make videos, the way that they interact with their fans and the broader internet, and what that has to say about our society, which also reminds me of the fact that I was very interested in psychology as well, very interested in analyzing my own psychology, my own experiences, and attempting to come up with a comprehensive story that explains my behavior and attitudes and thoughts. I feel like I was so multifaceted in the past. Like I just had so much going on. And these days it almost feels as though I need to perform that. Like I need to performatively get myself in the mood of being interesting, which is a weird kind of feeling. Like, it's not the kind of feeling that you necessarily want because it inevitably leads you to feeling like you fell off. OsakaSyndrome. Why have you fallen off? That's why I feel like this. Weird and bad, because I'm asking myself that question. And, like, I just kind of want to not feel like that, so I want to be interested in things. But the thing is, I don't know how to be interested in things when the only thing that I'm interested in as of now is playing Counter-Strike. I just want to play Counter-Strike forever. And sometimes TF2 when one of my friends drags me onto the game. That makes it sound bad. I actually really like being dragged onto that game. And I like the game too. It's a fun game, but for some reason, I almost never willingly play that game. Like, I need someone else to encourage me because it's just way too fast paced for me to want to play on my own. Not to say that aspect of it is bad, but I tend to have more fun playing that game with someone that I know on VC or multiple people that I know on VC, even better, because otherwise the fast pace will just end up kind of boring me. I like the fact that in Counter-Strike I can sit there and think out my moves and what I'm gonna do. It's nice. But that's basically all I do at this point. Like, I got my Super Nintendo out. I was playing some Yoshi's Island. Is that the one? Yeah. I was playing some Yoshi's Island and some DKC recently, but not anywhere near as much as these addictive online shooters. And even then, I don't think that constitutes a great interest playing those old Nintendo games. I mean, maybe if I was like sitting there and like learning every aspect of those Nintendo games, I could say like, okay, here's something that I can come back to YouTube and talk about. Here's something that I'm really deep diving right now. But I'm not really, I'm just sort of having fun, which there's nothing wrong with, but when you want to be an interesting YouTube man, you kind of need more than just fun. You need something a bit deeper to chew on. And I think I felt a lot happier when I had a lot of different deep things that I happened to have been chewing on at any one particular moment. It seemed like there was just so much stuff that I was interested in the past, and I was so excited about each and every one of those things. And now I'm just kind of here, doing my own thing. It seems like I'm a lot calmer than I used to be, with a lot less angst and general unwell feelings, but also like there's something deeper that I'm missing. And it's not as though I haven't been missing this for a while, because I have been. Like, I want to say ever since 2021, I feel like I've been missing this. And it's just gotten worse. Like, it's had ebb and flows. It's gotten less bad and more good. But overall, it seems like the trend has been downward. That may not be the case, but it's just how it seemed to me. And as a result of that, I can't help but feel as though I'm falling further and further down a cliff in terms of how interesting I am. But also, I think that this is because I'm not that interested in being interesting anymore. Like, if you watch my old videos, I would talk about being interesting in these almost existential terms. Like, I would say that the world around me needs to be interesting. I need to be interesting because that's the meaning of life. You know, being sad is all I ever experience. I'm so sad all the time. Life is miserable, blah, blah, blah. But at least I can be interesting because being interesting is being better, is better than being happy. And it's also being better than other people, I guess. That's what I thought at the time. And so I had this like, it felt like I was motivated by this almost like fiery dissatisfaction or discontent with what I called normies or normal people at the time. I had so much angst towards this imaginary group of people that is almost impossible to define or categorize because it's a term that's meant to lump the majority of humanity together, which is kind of an impossible feat for a single term. And so what ended up happening was there was like this imaginary enemy that I thought was fundamentally opposed to me and everything I stood for, that I had to live in rebellion against. I thought my very existence was an act of rebellion against them. And so everything that I would do was kind of motivated by this fiery indignance towards those people that I had imagined as existing. And I was kind of reveling in everything that I did because I just felt like I was, all that. I was so much more. And nowadays, I just feel like I'm a regular guy. I don't feel particularly interesting. I don't particularly desire to be interesting either. Like, I desire making better videos. That's the extent of it. I also desire to have more things that I'm lost in, like media-wise or in terms of learning things. But I don't have this desire to just be interesting and to have the world be so interesting. I almost feel like maybe a lot of that stuff I wasn't actually that interested in. I just was interested in the idea of being interested in it. Because then I could say, I'm better than you. But I don't feel better than anyone else anymore. I just feel like myself. And it's weird too because I was kind of schizo about it. I had, these issues with self-esteem at the same time that I was thinking that way. And I almost wonder if thinking that way was like a bizarre coping mechanism for my self-esteem issues. And nowadays I don't find myself seeing myself as that much of a problem. I just kind of see myself the same way as I see everybody else. And so the need for such a grandiose way of looking at the world is not there. I think, in other words, I grew up. I see myself as kind of boring now, or uninterested, uncurious, or uninspired. But I think the reality of the situation is that I just grew up. It's not like I don't love to learn anymore. I still do. I just learn at my own pace. Like, I learn things from time to time, but I'm not going to be constantly searching for information so that I can one-up somebody in a debate or show off my mad skills to anybody who's willing to listen. Like, I'm not better than you. I'm not better than anybody. There's no Norman invasion coming to hoard my village, burn my crops, and destroy my water supply, and deliver a plague onto my houses. There's just people out there who are like me. Maybe they express themselves a little differently. Maybe I seem awkward to them. But we're not that fundamentally different at the end of the day. It's not that hard of a thing to realize once you actually get out of your room and start interacting. Yeah, it's painful. Yeah, it's hard. It's still really hard. But something you end up realizing is that there's not this bizarre dynamic of where you're this like elite NEET and everybody else is is uh, is terrible. Um, I feel like people just are people. It's not really any of my business what they're doing or who they are. Why be so invested in the various trappings that come with people? Like, they're just doing their own thing. I just want to do my own thing. It's none of my fucking business. I shouldn't be out here trying to grandstand. And that realization, all that stuff that I ended up realizing a couple years ago, I think is why um, I stopped being as interested in all the crazy shit that I used to be interested in. But man, part of me wants to get back to that mindset. Just a little part of me. Because I feel like it's really good for the camera. I don't know how good it is for the soul. I guess on some level it's good for the soul too. But it's also bad for the brain. And that has its ups and its downs. I don't know. I think I just need to find a new thing. I know my sentences are trailing off here and I'm all over the place and don't know how exactly to end my thought, but I feel like I just need something to replace the fieriness that I was able to derive from that mindset. Like, I need something just a little bit more leveled out that I can be happy with and also derive meaning from. Because it seems like, I seem to fixate so much on this time before I stopped, being so fuck all normies, like I'm just gonna go out and be this elite NEET, like I'm so much better, like, look at all these different things. But some part of me feels so nostalgic for that time in my life. And when I thought that way, I don't know why. So I had to do this patchwork approach of taping together pieces of like a tarp in order to shut out the light that was coming through my window seal. I had to duct tape the parts that weren't fully shut without actually getting tape on the window, because I didn't want to tape up the entire fucking window. And what I ended up doing was just trying to put something over the parts where sun would peep out as much as I possibly could. And the end result was this. It mostly keeps the sun out. I think it should be fine. But, there's still holes here. In particular up top. So, we'll see if I'm able to get to sleep tonight. For you, it's morning. But for me, it's night. And so, I'm in dire need of this. We'll see if it works or not. So today I was thinking about my friend who is 18 years old. I am about to be 22 years old. And I think, especially in the modern day, but just always this has been the case, when you have an age difference like that, there's quite a stark contrast, especially the more experienced the 21, 22-year-old is, the more experienced that they are, the more of a contrast there's going to be. But moreover, there's going to be a lot of experience with an age differential that small at that particular time, because that 15 to 28, or at least 25, time period in our lives is by far the most volatile. It is the most volatile time period in our lives. And a lot of things can massively change in the course of a single year when you're in that zone. Now, of course, it slows down the further you get to like 25, 28, but nonetheless, you're still going to expect massive change. And so, of course, when I hear 18-year-olds say certain things, I'm going to think it's retarded. I'm going to judge the things that they say. I think that's fair. Not to say that they're not smart or that they don't raise good points sometimes, but there's simply a lack of experience that's endemic to their worldview that is impossible to ignore. And of course, he gets very angry when I raise this. I don't raise it very often, but when it's even implied, he seems to take great offense to it. It's something he seems to be very insecure about. I remember what that was like too. And so, that ends up coming out in the form of aggression, passive aggression, things of this nature. He seems to be very bothered by the fact that I have this view on the world that most people seem to have, which is that there's a hierarchy depending on age. Even when there's a small difference in age, it makes a big difference when you're at those lower ages the way that we are. But he doesn't like that. And I got quite annoyed with this because I thought, dude, I'm just saying my opinion. Like, you don't need to make it this big thing. You don't need to be so aggressive about it. Because I hadn't presented anything aggressively. I'd never even directly pushed the issue. I've only vaguely implied it like twice ever. But he watches my YouTube videos and hears the things that I say about Zoomers and people in his age range, and then he ends up listening to the things that I say in those videos, and I think he applies those things to himself. Like, he hears that stuff, and then he hears it as though I'm talking directly to him. And so, he ends up giving me all this shit about how I talk about Zoomers, and I was getting fed up with it the more that I thought about it. Like, why be so aggro about this thing that I don't even directly mention to you or make about you? But then I thought about it more, and I remembered how I was at that age. I kind of stopped being like this by the time I got to be 18. But, when I was like 17, I was extremely defensive of myself and my age. I mean, even when I was 18, I was as well. Because I would try to defend the idea that I could do certain things that you should probably only be doing when you're 21 or older even. I would be very defensive of the fact that I was doing that stuff. And I look back on that with regret, the fact that I did those things. And obviously I think my, explanations in defense of that stuff were ludicrous. So yeah, I was basically the same way at that age. And so, do I really have any right to be mad or bothered by him making every single thing that I say about Zoomers about himself? Do I really have the right to be that bothered by it? Like, I used to take things personally too, And I used to harp over the age thing a lot as well in order to defend the stuff that I was doing or my thoughts on things. I think at the end of the day, there's a certain insecurity that you have growing up that ends up getting remedied over time. I think in my case, my insecurity got remedied a lot earlier than it does for other people. But as a rule, this is how it works. And he is projecting his insecurities onto me and making the things that I say, the opinions that I give about himself, and getting annoyed about it. And I'm sure if he saw this video, he would probably hear the things that I'm saying and then get annoyed about that and then think, oh, like, you boomer, like, fuck off, go fuck yourself, like, I can't believe all the condescending shit that you're saying, you know? And it's like, I remember, I remember thinking like that, but, you know, when you're that age, you have 1,000,001 excuses as to why the true things that the people around you are saying are not true, if those things happen to be critical of you or a group that you feel particular attachment to and have kind of integrated into your identity. He identifies very much with the group that I criticize, to the point where even when the criticisms that I make of said group aren't pertinent to him or relevant to him, he takes them as though they're about him. And that's pretty fucking retarded. But it's how I used to be. So why were my videos in the past good, but now they are less good? Like, they're still good, but they don't have the same aura or energy I feel like I'm chasing from myself. Why is that? Well, I feel like it's primarily because I don't feel as comfortable on camera as I used to. I feel like I need to train myself to be comfortable on camera once again. Otherwise, I am going to continue making middling videos where I perhaps make good points and present them in a relatively quick fashion, not spending too much time dawdling, but doesn't sound exactly natural. Like, that's my problem, is that those videos don't sound exactly natural. Not always, not at least to me. Whereas if I look at some of my older stuff, I feel like it feels practiced, but it also feels natural. It feels like I never miss a beat, but that feels natural. And a lot of my newer videos feel forced. I think because I have spent a lot of time away from the video making field. I've had elongated breaks, and you lose your riz the less that you practice. So I feel like I just need to make a bunch of shitty videos about subjects that I don't really care that much about, or just force myself to find something to say the way that I used to, because that's what I did for years before my videos started getting good. I would just force myself to have something to say, or I would just aimlessly turn the camera on in order to get myself comfortable with improvising. Today, I got the AV cables for my Sega Saturn, the Sega Saturn that I've had for fucking years and haven't been able to do anything with. It turned out the entire time it was broken. It most likely has fried capacitors because it just comes to a black screen when you turn it on, which indicates that probably the capacitors are fucked. So I need to either fix it myself, which is really unlikely, especially given the fact that I don't have the tools, or just buy a new one. I feel like I'm probably just gonna buy a new one because I can't be arsed to fuck with this thing. I really can't. I'd want it in a different color anyway. Like, I like the way that the white Sega Saturn looks. I think that one looks pretty awesome. I might even want an American Sega Saturn, although I'm not sure, because all the games I want to play are from Japan anyway, so I feel like I should have a Japanese Sega Saturn, especially given the fact that without a mod chip, you're always going to need the action replay in the Sega Saturn to play the Japanese games, but one of the Japanese games I have, in fact, the only Saturn game I have, King of Fighters 95, requires a RAM expansion that has all the characters, all the animations on it. And obviously, you can't have two RAM expansions in at the same time, so it would have to be one or the other. Either the action replay or the one that becomes superfluous once the region locking is returned. So I think the smart move would just be to get a Japanese one, especially because, there's going to be very few American games I'll ever be able to buy. So that's probably what I'm going to do. I'll get a Japanese one again, and those go for like $100, $150. It shouldn't set me back too much. It's just fucking annoying because I thought I already had a Sega Saturn, and it turned out I didn't. And I bought all this stuff in order to get my Sega Saturn to work, when like I could have just spent that on other things that I needed, or other, Super Nintendo games, because I do want to expand my Super Nintendo collection. So I just have this paperweight sitting here in front of me until I manage to get something else in its place. It's kind of annoying, because I was really excited to boot that thing up and play it for the first time. I've never actually played on a Sega Saturn before, and I've just had this console sitting around since 2019, when I got it off that Japanese auction site, yahoo.jp. I got it for $50. I should have known that without cables on a Japanese site for such a low cost that it probably didn't work. But I never knew because I never had the cables to actually test it. I never wanted to take the risk with the limited amount of funds that I had, to buy cables and actually test it out, because I thought, well, what's the point if it's just not going to work? And lo and behold, it did not work after all these years. And now I have invested so much into this thing that I feel like I'm succumbing to the sunk cost fallacy, where it's like I've sunk so much money in that I'm going to sink even more money in just to be able to get the initial value of the money that I put in at first. It's not fun. It's not a great situation to be in, but it's the one that I'm in because my life is a shit show and my unluckiness is never ending. So that's where I'm at now. And I just sort of have to live with it. But also, I'm going to make lots of videos on this secret YouTube channel. What is this, the 14th or 15th or 16th secret YouTube channel? I just can't get away from this stuff. But you know what? That's how it's going to be. That's how it should be. I need to be making so many videos that I just feel accustomed to doing it in my sleep, that I could do it in my sleep. I feel like my speech is so stilted nowadays. In the past, I would have just said, so that I can feel like I can do it in my sleep, or so many videos that I could do it in my sleep. I would have said something like that. I wouldn't have said it in such a roundabout way. I need to get accustomed to this again. And the only way to do that is by doing this so many times and actively thinking about what I'm doing as I'm doing it, because much in the same way that, people who learn English and then come to America build up bad habits from when they first started that don't really go away, I could walk right into that trap with videos if I don't analyze my own behaviors and seek to change them. So that's really important. Honestly, I think the reason that I fixate so much on the past isn't even because of YouTube or passion or whatever. It isn't because I'm kind of blah these days or whatever. I think the reason why I fixate so much on that time is because it was the time before I had pretended to be transgender and then ruined my credibility among certain people by making up such a thing. And it was also a time before my home situation in the place that I used to live at got substantially worse, and my dad started bringing tweakers and homeless people and all kinds of riffraff all over the house and actively tearing apart the floor and walls and electric. They had destroyed the pipes underneath the house, him and those people. And so for a while, we all had to literally shit in a bag because there was no running water. And this was while he was letting multiple homeless people that he did meth with live at the house. And of course I was scared of those people because I didn't want to be around that. And so I would sometimes not eat for multiple days because the conditions there were so horrific. And I had pretty regular panic attacks, pretty severe depression. The only thing that distracted me from everything that was going on was being on the computer, but my diet was basically non-existent at the time. Like, I barely ate anything back then because I was afraid to leave the room. And when I would leave the room, they wouldn't stop pestering me and insulting me for how much time I'd spend in there in the first place. And it's like, of course I don't want to spend time, out of it, because you have all these criminal elements running around in the house, and you're just kind of generally unpleasant to be around because you're always on drugs, which makes you completely unpredictable. So of course I was staying in my room at the time, but a lot of the things that were done and said at that time, when things got that much worse at home, are things that I think had a permanent effect on me. And so I don't think I just yearned for a time when things were different or simpler, or I was more naive. I think maybe that's a component to it. But I think I also yearn for a time before things had gotten so much worse at my old house, and before I had such negative experiences with those people and with my father, because I had watched him fall so far down into drug addiction to the point where he ended up looking like a completely different person than the one I had ever known, and had become so unpredictable and lacking in self-control that he was very upsetting to be around. I almost said unsetting. Very upsetting to be around. Like, sometimes when me and my sister didn't want to spend time with him, he would start to threaten to smash everything outside our rooms, saying he was going to break everything. He'd slam on my door again and again and again, and I'd have to come out. And then he would just threaten me and insult me the whole time. I couldn't really live in my own house because of him and all those other drug addicts. And this was all while my disability check, which was meant to go to me and was meant to be used to take care of me, was being stolen from me by him and spent on these illicit things that he was not supposed to be spending it on. I was being taken advantage of and walked on, even though my money was paying all of the bills, technically speaking. It just wasn't going to me because the government had decided to give it to him instead. And I couldn't work, so I just had to continue to be abused again and again and again, all while thinking that transitioning to female was the only way I could get out of that horrific situation. And then traumatizing myself in the process of doing that as well, because I didn't want to be female. I just thought that doing that would be the only way I could get the hell out of there. It was an all-around terrible situation that didn't really have a solution. The only solution was waiting for my mom to get her own place and then leaving with her, which ended up taking until literally late last year, like summer last year. That scarred me, having to live there. With the poor conditions, the verbal abuse, the physical abuse, the fact that there were so many dogs, over 5 dogs, screeching and hollering and barking at all times, making sounds like they were suffering at all times. That was also a form of torture. It's the type of torture that government agencies employ when they're trying to get information out of people that they've captured. But I had to hear it all the time. And I was, at multiple points, starving all the while. Maybe all that shit I went through has something to do with why I'm not so bright-eyed and passionate and happy anymore, and wish that I could go back to a time when I was.